Okay, so first of all, for today's assignment, it's a very easy one again. So we're gonna read together E.B. White's Elements of Style. And what I would like you to do is to pick one item or just one chapter or one bullet point from that book. I keep calling it a book, but it's really just a leaflet. So it's like 30 pages in the huge font. So it's more like, I don't know, 20 minutes reading. It's not required, but I really would like you guys to read it because I use it as a reference book or even a dictionary when I write and I don't know whether this is the correct form or whether this is the best practices. So I would like you to find one item from that leaflet that you believe to be either incorrect or overgeneralizing, or in short, you just don't like it, right? There are lots of stuff going on there. Some are more of a uh, general, agreed upon rules. Some are a little bit too personal, I feel. So never treat any grammar books or this kind of writing style books as your Bible, because they are not. There are just toolbooks that help you to write a little bit better, and you can, of course, disagree with them. So I hope that this exercise will allow you to read this book a little bit more carefully and think about which corresponds to your understanding of what is good or correct or bad and wrong writing and what is not. So, and at the same time, I sort of also want to develop this idea that don't ever treat textbooks as something that is always correct, because it is not. Um, Actually, there are many people who do this for fun, where they just pick up mistakes from publications. So one Twitter account that I follow and that I really like is called Mistakes of New York Times, or Typos of New York Times. Share it in the chat. So I think this is a great place to learn, grammar and writing style. So how do I share this? Share profile via. Just copy this, I guess. Oh, I can just copy the handle. It's easier. Yeah, so this Twitter account is a thing that's for me at least interesting to follow. All right, so that's so much for today's assignment. Let's recap a little bit. What have we done last week? No, not last week. 2 days from to 2 days ago. So during last class, we sort of laid out the framework for rhetorical analysis. So we touched upon what is author, what is audience, what is intended author, what is the depth of author, figuratively. We also learned what is the context of an argument or a piece of rhetoric. We also learned what affect, what influences the understanding and the reception of any media or any texts, right? So for today's class, we're gonna do two things. The first thing is that, again, we're gonna read a little bit of elements of writing together. And the second thing is more closer to the uh, rhetoric framework that we have been acquainted with during the last class. So today we're gonna uh, talk about the triangle of rhetoric. So with that, you would be able to do your own rhetorical analysis, which would be our first big assignment that I'll talk about next week. So, okay, let's go into our class website. Again, I'm just gonna share my screen. You guys can all see my screen. It is the class website. Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, so just want to spend a little bit of time reading this with you guys together. So as you can see here, this is an incredibly short book. It's only 100 something pages, and the last few pages are all just appendix. You don't have to read it. And there are lots of introductions, etc., etc. So even if you don't have any time, and even if you just look at this content page, there is a lot of good stuff here. So the first chapter is all about grammar. I believe at this point you already know all the rules are listed here. If you have any questions, if you don't know whether something that your high school teacher had taught you is correct, just maybe review this very briefly. So my personal take of grammar is that this is not the primary thing that I will focus when I grade your assignment. There could be grammatical mistakes in your assignment. That's fine. And I will not spend my time picking all of them from your assignments. And also I would not take points off your assignment if you just have a handful of grammatical mistakes. But the thing is that if you are not writing for me, if you're writing a business email, if you're writing a letter, if you're writing to someone that is important, if you're writing for an important purpose, they would probably also tolerate to some reasonable extent grammatical errors, as long as it does not distract them from reading your letter or the piece of writing that you're doing. It will not be as many as so your correct sentences should be more than your wrong sentences. So, but when I review your assignments, I'll also, if there is something very obvious, I'll make a comment. But I'm not a grammar police, and nor should you be. When you grade or when you review each other's assignment, I think it's a good rule of thumb that if anything sticks out, kindly mark them or make a comment. But this should never be anybody's primary focus. A perfectly grammatically correct paper could be worthless if there is no starring in it. And on the other hand, many great writers, they write with lots of grammar mistakes. If you are uncertain about whether your writing contains too many grammatical mistakes, go to this website called Grammarly.com. There's a free version that you can try, which I think is already enough. The paid version is more about style rather than grammar. So yeah, just give it a shot. It will tell you if you have any obvious mistakes, and I highly recommend that you push everything that you write for any important purposes through this pipeline, just to make sure that there's nothing too embarrassing. Okay, so that's that. I think all of these items in the first chapter is self-explanatory and easy, I think. So the second part is where I think is most interesting. So this is one level beyond grammar. So this is principles, or as you may call it, style, right? So a good writing consists of different levels. So first of all, it has to be more or less grammatically okay. And once you get that, you may have a acceptable or reasonable style, meaning that it's clear, it's crisp, it's concise, it's to the point. It doesn't confuse your readers. It doesn't burden your readers with too many jargons and too many blah blah. So there are a few items that I believe is of importance here. So first of all, is that your design should ideally be consistent. One of my favorite examples is that Oxford comma, right? So many people use Oxford comma, many people don't. What is an Oxford comma is that I believe you guys all know this, right? So if you have apple, orange, and lemon, whether you have a comma in between the two and the second and the third items, if you do, that's called an Oxford comma. I personally use Oxford comma all the time. I believe everybody should use it, but it is not a mistake or wrong to not use Oxford comma. But the most important thing is that you should adhere to a style. If you use it, always use it. If you do not use it, never use it. The style should at least be consistent within a piece of writing, right? And the second item here, I think, is also interesting. So the unit of composition should be a paragraph. Many small assignments that we do, they may only have one or two paragraphs. That's fine. But once you decided that you are going to do a longer piece of writing, you don't necessarily need lots and lots of paragraphs. The rule of thumb is that if you only read the first sentence of your paragraph, you should have a brief idea or a rough idea about what this paragraph is about. Note that this is not always true. If you're doing literary writing, then your paragraph could be in any shape that you want. But many traditional forms of short stories and novels still adhere to this rule. And I believe you would almost always need to adhere to this rule if you're doing academic writing. So if you're writing a paragraph, it should tell me what you are doing in the first paragraph, in the first sentence in that paragraph, as well as the last sentence in that paragraph. Okay. So next, use the active voice. Well, this is a bit more personal and overgeneralizing, and I think you should only always adhere to this rule if you're doing academic writing. So passive voice, they just sound weaker, right? It could be your purpose. It could be your purpose that you're not uncertain about a fact and you want to sound weaker. That's perfectly okay. But it's not okay if you're doing academic writing. So in your academic writing, in your essay, if you state a fact and you are confident of your fact, as you should be, use active voice whenever possible. The fourth is sort of related, right? Never use double negative form in academic writing. Although it might not mean the same thing if you use the positive form or use double negative, it might not always mean the same if you are just using that in oral English. But academic writing, people prefer it to be concise and confident. Right, Katerina says you always get suggestion in Grammarly and never. Oh, I think there's a button you can click and it will adjust for you. I think, yeah. Or like a sort of the clever way to do this would be to just always click accept, accept, accept. Although you never know where you're wrong, but
for Grammarly, it's interesting because when it comes to, of course, like the other suggestions, you can go ahead and click it. But then when it comes to like passive voice, it just says that it's being, this like phrase is being written. So then I would usually kind of go about and try to look through, like I would try to like kind of like adjust the sentence, but never knew like the proper, kind of like the proper principle to keep in mind when adjusting a sentence from like passive to active.
Oh, right. Sorry, I misread your message. I thought, yeah, you said you always get that suggestion. Okay. Yeah. So apparently it's already embedded into Grammarly. But yeah, this is a little bit overgeneralizing, right? So I killed that man, or that man is killed by me. It's different, but a sentence like that doesn't always appear in academic writings. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, 17 is a good one. So the writer of this book, E.B. White, is a great supporter of omitting all the unnecessary words. And I believe all of the rest, all of the other items here are sort of an extension of this 17th item. So let's go to that. There is a laundry list of useless words that he suggests you should always avoid. Where is that? This is 8. Jeez. Okay, here we go. There are a few expressions that he just hates. Yeah, the most interesting one is the fact that he suggests that you should never use the phrase the fact that. I don't know. This is a bit personal. This is personal opinion. What I would suggest is that anytime you write something like the reason that, the fact that, you can just think again, right? You can just think about whether you absolutely need to structure your sentence like this, or whether it could be truncated. Because most time it could be truncated, right? And there are words that he hates as well. For example, utilize. He says that we should never use the word utilize because there is no difference with use at all. And I'm not sure. Is it? I mean, utilize is a bit more formal, I think. Yeah, please. Yes, here.
I think the use of utilize and use can be changed because I feel like use has a more broader explanation. When utilize, it's like more industrial sounding, like you use
Yeah.
it for like explaining how things work rather than how you just use things in your regular day-to-day life, especially in text.
Yeah. Yeah, great. A lot of times when I write for scientific journals, I use the word a lot. I don't think it's a crime. Yeah, all right. So much for that. This is just one little leaflet that I suggest you to read. It's again not required reading. We have very few required reading for this class. And I would never require you to read a book, even if this book is a leaflet. Okay, so let's go to the next item that we're going to talk about for this class, for this section, which is called Introduction to Rhetorical Analysis. So this is a continuation of what we have discussed on Monday, right? So there are only 2 bullets that we're going to cover today. And once you are done with this, I think you are done with the introduction of rhetorical analysis, and you could just go and do your own rhetorical analysis, which we're going to do a little bit during this class. All right. So 3 elements for a rhetoric that makes a rhetoric or a piece of rhetoric persuasive. Oh, I'm sending you this link. So everything that I'm showing is linked from the index page of our class website, eng110.1yq.net. So I do not have slides. I don't like slides. I like notes. And every single note or notebook is linked to the front page of our main class website. And on this class website, you can also see the Slack. If you're not already in Slack, which I hope you are at this point, you can also see the agenda, the schedule, and of course the Zoom link. By the way, we only have one Zoom link. We're always going to use this Zoom link. Okay, so 3 elements of rhetoric that makes it persuasive. The first is ethos. So ethos, in short, is the authority or credibility of the author, but it could entail a little bit more than that. it could entail the relationship between the author and the audience, right? And if you think about it, how authoritative or how credible the author is also dependent upon the relationship between the author and the audience. So I'm teaching you this, and at this point, for some of you, I might sound authoritative. However, I have many bosses, supervisors that I need to deal with, and they will not regard me as authoritative as you might regard me now. For example, Anthony Fauci, he said something to the whole nation, and some might take him as authoritative. Some who disagree with him might not, right? So this authority and credibility is always relative. There is no absolute authority or credibility. But when you do rhetorical analysis, the first thing that you could consider is why this author could be regarded as authoritative and credible. So this has something to do with the author and audience and context that we discussed on Monday, right? So it's dedicated by the environment, the context, the background of both the author and the audience. Okay, pathos. So pathos, I think it has the same root with empathize, right? So it refers to all the emotional appeals to the audience. So if you try to persuade or convince someone by the means of make your audience feel the same as you feel, you're using the pathos factor here to do your rhetoric. And sort of the opposite of that is logos, logic and truth. So as you can imagine, pathos and logos, it's used, the balance of which is different in different genre of writing. If you're doing scientific writing, you should almost always only use logos, right? You couldn't try to convince your audience that, okay, pity me, please, I spent years on this project. Please believe what I'm doing is true. I need to publish this. And you couldn't try to talk the sense out of your readers if you're writing a romance novel, right? There's little logic there. So remember that logos refer to not only logic, but also truth. So by truth, I mean evidence, data, statistics, reasoning, etc., etc. All right, so that's that. These three factors, they are intertwined with each other. You can never only have one part of it, right? So if you only have ethos, you only have the authority, that's a cult. Right? Anything someone says is always true. It's either a dictatorship or a cult. If you only have logos, I guess that could work. That's just a scientific paper. If you have only pathos, then it's a really, really, really cheesy literary piece. So last time we talked about the cliched way to tell a story. And for today, we're also going to talk about how to do rhetorical analysis in a cliched way. Hold on, so is logic and truth kind of similar to credibility? That's sort of different. So credibility is the credibility of the author. Sorry, I might have confused on that other one. So credibility is always, so credibility here refers to the credibility of the author, right? So when you do rhetorical analysis, you can always first identify the reason why we should ever listen to this guy, right? Whereas logic is presented in your argument. For example, Anthony Fauci says that a mask Anthony Fauci presented a piece of statistics, a set of experiment where a group of people wear masks and another group of people don't wear masks. So this is his evidence. Whereas the identity of Anthony Fauci, his whole package, right? His position, his track record, his CV. He's an alum of mine, by the way. His whole package is part of the ethos of that rhetoric. So that's separated. If Anthony Fauci says something wrong or something ridiculous, in that argument, you still have ethos, but you do not have logos. If something you do not trust, if someone you do not trust says something logic with evidence, then there you have logos, but not ethos. Did that answer your question? Yes, no? All right, great. So let's move on to the cliched way to do rhetoric analysis. You'd have a description first, and that's always almost always the case. So when you are presented a piece of writing, and if you were asked to do rhetoric analysis, you should always summarize what did it say. This is the foundation of your arguments that follow. If you do not summarize, if you do not describe, then it is very hard for me to correlate your argument to the pieces in the text, right? So when you do this description, you should always have analysis and evaluation in mind. It should serve as a preparation for your analysis and evaluation. And at the same time, it's a good way to make up some word count. If you don't know what to write, just make your description lengthy. Don't tell anybody that I told you that. The second part is the analysis. So the analysis is, well, we just use the terms that we've just discussed. And you apply them. You, for example, say, okay, who's the audience? Who's the author? The audience comes from this and that background. The author had this and that background. This is under so-and-so context. And for example, you should always point to the details in the text, right? So this particular detail in this piece of text makes this effective for so-and-so subpopulation. And you can always incorporate ethos, pathos, and logos in your analysis. And after all this, you should have an evaluation. Is it effective? And the answer is never binary. No rhetoric is effective to everybody. No rhetoric is completely useless to everybody. So it is effective to an extent and to some subpopulation. So what you should include in your evaluation is that what kind of audience would be most sensitive to this specific rhetoric? Why? And here, keep your reasoning short and to the point, because you've already done analysis. If you look at this closely, this is almost the framework that we discussed during the last class, right? So description is sort of the introduction. Analysis is the progress. Evaluation is the climax and the resolution. So again, this is the sort of just no-brainer. You're just filling the gaps. But many scholars writing this way just So the framework is not the most important part, right? You can always fill in your intellectual insights into this general framework. All right, so that's all I have for you. I'm gonna stop recording and I'm gonna take questions first.